Uh, Good afternoon in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm Doug Brunke, founder and CEO of Global Chamber. This is our second export league for Phoenix, and we're doing it a little bit differently this time. We're doing training programs that lead into the selection process for Export League. The basic idea of Export League is to get more exporters connected around the world. That's what Global Chamber does best. When companies come to Global Chamber and are part of what we do, they tell us who they want to meet, and we make those connections in different parts of the world. And that's pretty valuable for exporters to be connected to potential targets. And so that's the basic idea. And the city of Phoenix is sponsoring this program. So it's open to members and non-members. It is beyond the city of Phoenix. So anybody in Arizona can join. And ultimately, if you're an exporter, register with a Global Chamber. There is a landing page, and Eugene, during the program, will be putting that in the chat area. And you can always send us information at info@globalchamber.org, or just go to our contact page and say you're interested in the Export League for Phoenix, and we'll get you registered. So this year, with that training, we've got 4 sessions. Number one was a general conversation, and Laura Raguda of FIT was the main speaker, and she talked about the various aspects for an exporter. The number two program was last week, and that was around financial considerations, particularly things like export credit and financing and banking, those kinds of topics. And then this week is my favorite, and I think probably Martha's favorite as well, and that's the sales and marketing aspect. And I'll introduce now Eugene to take us through today's program. And at the end, we'll be talking more about the next steps, next week's program. In the 2 weeks from now, we have another program. And then we'll be doing the selection and the connections for the winning groups for exporters. And then we're going to announce everybody and the success of the program, hopefully success of the program, on April 24th in an in-person event in Phoenix. So Eugene, I hand it off to you. Eugene Sohn is a project manager with Global Chamber. She's actually a graduate on international trade. She's coming to us through the Korea West program of Cultural Vistas, and she's got 3 programs that she's working on at Global Chamber through the summer, and they're all related to exporting and Export League, and kicking this one off and our next one in India and the next subsequent ones throughout the year, starting about every month around the world. Eugene, you've got the floor.
Thanks, Doug, and hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. As Doug mentioned, I'm Eugene Sohn, and I've been working at Global Chamber since last December as a project manager. And now I'm leading the Export League in Phoenix. So this Export League is a special initiative for exporters led by Global Chamber and sponsored by City of Phoenix to help regional companies reach more clients and partners around the world. And today we have the Export League Training Session 3, which is about sales, marketing, and logistics. And we have 3 speakers today. And the first speaker would be Martha. So she is Vice President of International Sales at 21st Century Healthcare. So she has over 15 years of experience in international sales, marketing, and logistics of dietary supplements. So now I hand over to Martha.
Thank you, Eugene. Nice to meet you all, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. That's a mouthful sometimes, I think. It's great to be here today, and as Doug said, this is probably my favorite topic, all because, well, as Eugene said, I am 21st Century Healthcare's Vice President of International Sales. 21st Century is a vitamin manufacturer here in Tempe, Arizona. We are mostly a domestic sales company. However, about 15% of our sales are international, and the department is basically as of right now, it's basically me. So I handle everything from finding an international partner to establishing the relationship with the partner, eventually selling the product, registering the product, dealing with the regulatory side of things, and then the logistics and what follows. So it is a very broad, I suppose, a very broad position that I hold. And it's all fed from, thankfully, my experience in my whole career. I actually have a PhD in biochemistry, and that's actually what helped me get into the international sales side of things with this company. Because as you will find out through my talk, vitamins actually have to be registered when you go around the world. And that's not something that's typical in the US. As you know, you can put a product on the shelf and it does not need to be registered. You do have to follow guidelines by the FDA, but you don't have to register with the government. So that's a little bit different when you go and try to sell these products around the world. And so let me launch into my hopefully helpful presentation here. I'm going to share my screen and you let me know if this works. This is the first time I've ever had to actually share like this. So we will see how it goes. Okay, is this in presentation mode now? Now it is? Is it good?
Yeah, now it is.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so one thing that I think is important to consider and is very obvious is that within the US, all products and services can be very differently sold and marketed, of course. And in the international world, in the same token, actually, products and, oh, I've lost my screen there. One second. Well, there we go. Sorry about that. Okay. So in the US, these products and services can be very different in how they're marketed and sold, but equally so internationally, they can be even more different than how they're sold in the US. So what do you do first? And I think all of these topics have been, in a very general terms, been touched in the last two sessions. And I'll just share a little bit more detail on how we approach things, at least at 21st Century, and very targeted, obviously, towards our market, but certainly things to keep in mind in other markets. Obviously, first, you need to determine where you will go first, which country you intend to target first. Now, in order to do that, and I know that that can be a very daunting task. For us at 21st Century, we actually started out when the company was started in 1991, I believe actually international was one of the first things we did. So we've always been exporting. With that being said, obviously, we weren't always exporting to all the countries. And so I have had to enter new markets throughout my tenure at 21st. And in some ways, I've had to upkeep our international sales, which can also be a little bit of a tricky situation. And I'll touch on that in a second. So in order to enter into a new market, whether you are a brand new exporter or an experienced exporter, it's important to think about your options and how to find partners and how to find the country that you want to go into. So I always put on here trade shows as first, because for us as a company, we don't actively, I guess I should say, what you would normally do in the US is maybe you knock on doors and you cold call and you say, are you interested in my product, perhaps? But for us, what we've tended to do was attend trade shows. You're displaying your product, and hopefully, if your product is well known in the US or it has a great following in the US, international people probably know of it or have heard of it. And even if they don't, this is a great way to showcase it and get people excited and interested. So you can find trade shows that are dedicated just to the US. Lots of international people go to those trade shows, but I think even more helpful is to attend trade shows that are international to begin with, whether they're very general in international trade or very targeted to your market. So we've attended trade shows, we've exhibited during these trade shows, and we just get people to come up to our booth and they're very interested. They give us their cards, and that's all great and good. But outside of that, what's important, I think, is it can be a very daunting task to contact all these people back. So the way that we've approached it is allow them to contact us and see who really truly is interested in our product. So by doing that, then you can start dialogues, and instead of you spending all the effort, you allow that partner, hopefully a future partner, to engage with you and show you their interest and their commitment to your product and or to your service. So that's one way to kind of do things. Of course, there's many ways, but that's one way of doing things in a trade show. Another way is to put it out there on your website that you are interested in starting to export. You have a contact form, perhaps. Are you interested in our products internationally? And then you get people to send you their information. And again, that kind of goes hand in hand with the trade show side. One of the, I think, a really important and not necessarily easy, but very helpful way is to seek help. Obviously, you can seek help from U.S. Commercial Services. They have many programs that can help with narrowing down a country, narrowing down countries that you might want to export into, narrowing down partners as well, because they have programs that can match you with different companies that are already interested in a certain market. So U.S. Commercial Service may have put out, for example, we're interested in partnering dietary supplement manufacturers with people in the States. So now U.S. Commercial Service has done all the legwork for you, perhaps, and saying these are trusted people that you can begin working with, etc. So use the U.S. Commercial Service as best as you can. And again, with their programs, or even just speaking with their offices around the world. Then another one for us here in Arizona is the Arizona District Export Council, of course, that is tied to the U.S. Commercial Service. But any of the district export councils around the U.S. are made up of experts in exporting in many different fields. The key thing here is that at least 50% of the members of the councils have to be manufacturers. So you do have people who are experts in a more broad sense, or maybe in a, y'all met with Michael Patterson, so he does the legal side of things. Now you're meeting with me, where I'm on the manufacturing side, hands-on with exporting. So there's lots of experience that you can get from the people on a district export council. The other is, for example, on our side, the Arizona Commerce Authority. I didn't list on here chambers of commerce, but of course, actual chambers of commerce, who have to stamp your documents sometimes, help you legalize documents. Those are great sources of information as well. And I won't leave out Global Chamber, because by meeting people, I think most of the time, all you have to do is meet someone across the pond in order to get some interest. I think with Doug's help, I have gotten linked with several people who either have wanted to export and some who have wanted to import. So I've matched some people looking for their products from across the world that wanted to get into the US, and I've matched them up with people here in the US who could help them do that. So it goes both ways, and I think it's a great tool. It's a great place to meet people and make connections. Now, the next step, of course, is to select a partner. And how do you do that? I think it's tough, and sometimes it's a little daunting to know, are you choosing the right partner? Do you want multiple partners in one country? Can you have multiple partners in one country? Do you need an exclusive distributor? Do you need an exclusive importer? Those are all questions that you have to ask yourself of the country that you're going into. And again, places like U.S. Commercial Service can help you with that, or even the partners that you might engage with. When you're engaging in conversations with those potential partners, you need to ask the company for details. Details, of course, of the company itself. Have they imported before? Do they have knowledge of how to bring product into their country, especially in your field, in your market? Do they know how to import their products into their country? And by that, I mean, are there regulations? Are there registration requirements? Are there required documents? Do they know all that? I have often encountered people who reach out to us and say, oh, I'm interested in your products. Can you sell them to me? And the question will be, do you have registration requirements in your country? And they'll often say, no, nothing is required. But then when you do your due diligence and you find out that wasn't so accurate, there are registration requirements, and then you have to go through a process to figure out what exactly is required in order for you to send your product overseas. So you really have to do a little bit of homework first into the company that you want to work with, the country that you want to work with, and the processes to do so. So then once you've established a connection with someone and a country, then you ask yourself, are you really ready to sell? And there's a couple scenarios that I'm going to just put out. One is the very obvious scenario one, the easy and the simple one. Your product or your service can be sold directly into the new country through any distributor of your choosing, and there may not be any requirements. So you work out the details of the pricing and your new customer agrees. Since there's no requirements to export your product, the customer places an order, you work out the details of the payment. I think you spoke about some of those financing questions last week, whether you want to do your order prepaid, you want to do terms, that's up to you and what you are comfortable as a new exporter or as an experienced exporter. For us, just as an example, 21st Century, we do give terms to our very established customers, but we always start first with prepaid terms. It can be something as 50% to process the order, for example, to put it into my system, and then 50% before shipping. So that way I'm not putting myself at risk with a new customer that I don't know very well yet. It could be 50% to process the order and maybe 50% after 30 days. That covers my costs at least, or close to. You're taking a little bit of a risk, but hopefully it's somebody that's a little bit more established as well, and that you have faith that they will pay you in the time that you've given them. Now, then you get your order ready for shipment. You either arrange the logistics yourself through a trusted forwarding agent that you already have experience with, or that you've now established for your company, or your customer arranges all of it. I know that Laura talked a little bit about Incoterms and such, and that's obviously very important in that piece of it. And I'll leave the logistics side of things because I know you have a next session where you will talk about all that. Then your goods ship, they arrive in the country, they clear the customs, your customer goes off to sell your product, and everything is great, everything was easy, and they come back, they repeat orders as needed, but you have no contract commitment with this new customer of yours. So that's a great scenario. It's an easy one. It's probably the ideal one. However, let's say that there are many more requirements for you to sell. So, and there's many variations, of course, of this, my so-called scenario number 2. It's a little trickier, but it's always doable. You identify your country and your potential partners to sell your product or your service with, but you now have determined that you have requirements that you have to go through first. So this other company knows what the requirements are, and hopefully you're working very closely with them to try to get through these different requirements. So you have to figure out your company and or your product must be registered. So you have to figure out what that means for you. Is the distributor the owner of the registration, or are you? How long is the registration good for? And the reason why I put these questions out is because when you register either your company, well, I should say when you register your product, because in some countries you don't need to register your company first. With a Ministry of Health, for example, you just need to register the product. But in that case, if the registration is owned by the distributor in country, if that registration is good for 5 years, are you prepared to have faith in that distributor to know that for 5 years, they will do the best they can to sell your product? If you don't have that faith yet, then you've really got to think hard about this, because you will not be able to necessarily take that product to another distributor if there is an exclusive distributorship that you've signed, or it's hard to transfer registrations. There are many variations of that, but you really do have to think hard about how that's going to work. Then the next question, of course, is what will it take to register and how long could it take? Just as an example, I do a lot of business with UAE and Dubai, and there's two pathways to register vitamins in UAE. You can either go through the Dubai municipality, which essentially allows you to register any product really, and it's a very simple process. And in that case, you can essentially distribute and sell anywhere within Dubai, or you can go the more tricky process, which is registration through their Ministry of Health, which then allows our products to be sold and covered by insurance. It's a much longer process, but it has an upside to it because patients in UAE can then buy your product as a prescription product covered by insurance. So it has a double benefit. Now, we had a product, I think it was the very first product I registered with Ministry of Health. It took 3 years to register the product. And unfortunately, in Dubai, what happens is that the registration certificate is good for 5 years, but it does not start from the date that the registration is approved. It actually starts from the date that the registration process begins. So the first date that you submitted documents, that's when it begins. So by the time that my product was already registered, already 3 years had gone by. I only had 2 years left on the registration, and I was basically filing for re-registration by the time that I received the approval. So that's what I mean by you need to really pay attention and see how long could it take. Are you willing to wait that out before you can actually start selling your product? There is an investment of time, of money in case documents are needed. There's multiple things there that you need to consider, but again, it's doable. Now, as you've sort of determined all these things, are you ready to sign a contract with this partner given these findings? Are you ready to sign an exclusive agreement? Or maybe you are willing to have a couple of distributors. You need to make sure that those are things that are included in your agreement, whatever it may be. Are you going to put some terms to that exclusive agreement in terms of sales goals? You can say if this distributor does not sell this amount, then, we have the right to terminate or to revisit. You can always say, that it's something to be discussed at the time. For us, for our long-term customers, we know that the world fluctuates a lot. It's very difficult to plan forecasts sometimes because of the world and the way that it works, and things change. So we give them the benefit of the doubt, especially when they're established customers. Maybe they didn't meet the goal that they were supposed to, but we know the effort is there and it's a world situation, or there was a war or something like that. So we try to take that into account, especially if they're long partners and we know that they've done a lot to establish our product in the country or in the region. Then, once you've signed your agreement, are you able to provide all the documentation needed for registration of the product? Do you have people on your team that can help you accomplish this? For me personally, this was where my biochemistry degree came in very handy because my science background with vitamins helps out tremendously. Like I said, vitamins are actually registered, which means they're sold in pharmacies by a pharmacist, by prescription, not necessarily over the counter. And so that's a huge thing. So for example, in the Middle East, it's not salespeople going out and selling our products. It's actually medical reps that do so. So I may have a customer who has a team of medical reps who are going out and selling our products to the pharmacies, to the pharmacists. And the way to convince them, of course, is by knowing the product. So do you have people on your team here who can help you with those questions? Do they have the background of the product enough to sell that or to put together the documents needed? For example, you might need a certificate of free sale, a certificate of good manufacturing practices, a certificate of origin. Maybe they will need to be legalized. Do you know how to legalize documents? Do you know where to go if you don't know how to do that? There's always people who can help. Your U.S. Commercial Service can help. Your new customer can actually help to tell you whether a document needs to be legalized, and then it's on your side to determine what steps you need to take. So then, of course, once you go through the process, you successfully register your product, and now your sales can officially begin. And that's the sweet spot, right? Now that you have gotten to that part. But obviously, the road can be a long one, and you do have to have patience and stick with it because it's a terrible tragedy when you get to a point where you've done all this legwork, you're ready to go, and then all of a sudden something happens and it falls through, and you have to start over. And that can happen. So you have to be willing to take that risk. Now, once you've sold your product in, you have the sale, you have the order, you have the money in hand, and the product is gone and it's arrived in country. Now you have to be prepared to continue to educate. It's not just, you're not just educating a registration. Now you're educating your customer to the product. Maybe it's very well known and understood, but a method of sale, like I was saying with the pharmacies, it'll dictate what your partner may need to know to market, promote, and sell your product. In the US, for example, vitamins cannot make any medical claims, so there's very little that we can say here in the States. But obviously, around the world, vitamins have, we all know that, for example, a vitamin C is an immune booster. So can you back that up? Can you teach someone, and vitamin C is a very simple example to give, but for example, maybe an herbal product, do you have the background to teach your new customer all about that herb and ensure that they can in turn teach their medical reps who then teach their pharmacists about this product? I always rely on my customer to do what they need to do in country. So this is the part where you get educated, you listen to your new partner, you trust in their ability to sell your product and to rely on their own country's market knowledge to do so. If they tell you that they need more medical claims, that they need brochures that will sell your product, and you normally don't do that in the States, be prepared to either help them with that or guide them on how to do that. Most of the time, your customers will be very willing to do that on their end, but with your help. And then, of course, as you continue, once your product is there, you have to remember that re-registrations might have to happen. So you need to continue to learn either the regulations, the regulatory compliance aspect, the processes. They change all the time. It can change actually from week to week, unfortunately. So while I sent in a product dossier last week, this week I might actually have to send something slightly different because the regulatory agency receiving the documents have changed things. So you have to always be prepared and ready to continue to learn these processes. Again, registrations expire or documents have to be renewed. So always enlighten yourself with what you need to do to continue to have those processes done. And then be prepared to adapt to changes. I think that is one of the biggest maybe hurdles that I have had, is that everything changes so quickly. Things become more difficult sometimes with regulatory compliance, where, you know, a lot of the countries are third world countries, so they start very light on regulatory maybe, but as the world continues to move forward, they start listening to other countries and they start putting new regulations in place. So it does become a little bit more tricky or difficult to do so, and you have to keep making sure that you are educated in how to do that and that you have the right people to help you with that. Last, keep in mind, exporting is not necessarily a direct path. It takes many twists and turns, and even after you've had your first export experience and you think you have it down, you probably don't, and that's okay. You're always learning. But the bottom line is exporting can provide a benefit for your company, even if you can learn to plan and do it right. And then even when you don't get it right the first time, there's always an upside to it. I think my favorite part about it, and I think this is kind of a fun tidbit for me personally, is everybody always thinks that international is travel, 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 but it doesn't have to actually be that way. I work from home. I've been remote for 10 years. I tend to take only one trip, maybe 2 trips a year, which is actually fine. This world today with how we can communicate with people as we're doing right now through Zoom has, I think, facilitated that tremendously. I tend to find a trade show in a region where I can have a lot of my customers come to meet me. So there are ways to be a little bit more efficient with your spending when you are trying to export. and that's always a benefit. If you can find a trade show where many people can join, like in Dubai, for example, the Arab Health Trade Show is one of the largest in the world. And I invite my customers from the region to come out and meet me there, and I have all the meetings there, and then I come home and that pretty much takes care of the travel for the entire year sometimes. And then you follow up with emails and Zoom calls and calls and things like that. So it is a windy and twisty path, but it is one that can give a lot of satisfaction, not just to your company, but to you personally as well. You meet great people around the world. You actually can create families around the world. I have an Arabic family that I care for very much that have been my customers for 15 years, and it's always a joy to see all of what happens when you put your heart and soul into an exporting process. And if you have global and international and the world in your veins, then it's always a lot more fun than when you're starting actually from scratch. So my contact information is there on this last page, and Eugene, please feel free to share that if anybody is interested in following up or getting a little bit more advice, more hands-on advice. I'm happy to help. And with that, I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Martha. It was amazing present. And we have one more speaker who is Eduardo. Eduardo, are you ready?
I'm always ready.
Yeah, let me just briefly introduce you. Eduardo is the president of 258 Consulting LLC, and with extensive experience in business development, finance, and supply chain solutions. He previously served as the Deputy Trade Commission for ProMexico in Arizona and Nevada, and held various roles in the Mexican Export Development Bank. Yeah, so yeah, feel free to start, Eduardo.
Thank you, Eugene. I appreciate it. So how much time do I have, Eugene?
I think 15 minutes is enough.
Sounds
15
good.
minutes? Yeah, it's right.
Sounds good. Yeah, I will probably need less because I'm most interested in the questions.
Yeah, probably 10 or 15 would be best so that Laura has a chance to spend a few minutes as well.
Yeah, and I guess we're going to sound very repetitive. There's no really, this is not rocket science. It's very common sense when you're trying to export or diversify your exports. So I'll go by general information about what Martha already spoke regarding marketing and strategies to enter new markets. I also think it's very important to have the correct and appropriate price for that particular market. So calculating the export price is very important. And of course, as Martha mentioned, the right distributors and the distributing channels, depending the market, right? So every market is different. And in ones could be that business to consumer will be more efficient through internet sales. In other cases, probably you will need a distributor or a more mass market partner in that particular region. So, yeah, so the importance of effective marketing and having a great strategy for planning will save you a lot of time and money, right? So everybody knows that you need a strategy, you need a roadmap if you're getting to a new market. And the roadmap, well, we'll try to anticipate any issues that you may have in that particular market. So setting up your goals, setting up your budgets, and also focusing on your capabilities in manufacturing. So you don't want to bite more than you can chew, and you don't want to go into a market that probably is going to be too complicated or difficult, like the Mexican market for vitamins and supplements, right, Marta? So So yeah, it's having those strategies in place, setting up your goals. Those goals, remember, they have to be measurable. You have to be accountable, and they have to be well. We'll talk some more. They have to be appropriate to what you want to do, right? So yeah, I mean, finding the right market for your product. For example, in Ensenada many years ago, there's a lot of abalone that was being not fish, collected from the sea, and there was no market in Mexico. So the market is really in Asia. So that's where your market is, right? Sometimes your product uh, is not in your local market. Maybe it's abroad. So that's a good reason to export. Also, common sense dictates that you have to service your local market before you start growing and attacking or prospecting new possibilities in other markets. So um, the other consideration is that your marketing material has to be appropriate to those international markets. You have to be aware of cultural sensitivities, uh, having a good translation. Sometimes literal translations are not the best. You want to be able to communicate culturally, but also in a manner that it reaches the right market with the right words. Um, so having somebody that not only translates, but also we call it in Latin America, tropicalize the market, make it more appropriate for the market. So that's also something to consider. And of course, right now you have to save time and money. So having a great digital marketing and e-commerce is a must right now. And that goes alongside with what I was mentioning about having your material and your marketing cultural verified and translated. Maybe your market is not in an English speaking country. Maybe it's in a Latin American country or an Asian country or a Middle Eastern. So be very resourceful in researching where the potential markets are. Like Marta said, the U.S. Commercial Service offers great information. They have done the lead work for you, so they have identified potential customers or potential markets that will be appropriate for different products from the U.S. Once you identify your market, well, you have to do your research in that particular market. You have to understand the demand of that project. One factor that you can check is check import-export statistics for that market. And if you see a country imports more of that particular product more than it exports, that will give you an idea. There's probably some interesting local consumption of that or local demand of that particular project. So that's one way to identify potential gaps or potential opportunities in that market. The other strategies that you have to think of is, do you really need a presence in that market? Or do you really need to have somebody there representing you? Sometimes it is better for you to set up your own presence with your own company and with your own employees. And sometimes it is much better to have that run by a partner. But sometimes it's difficult to find partners, so you have to go and do your own distributorship or your own presence. So contemplate that in your strategies and your roadmap. And of course, regulatory compliance is always a challenge, especially there is a big difference between importing into a country and selling into the country, right? So you probably are able to import your product into that particular country, but do you have the permits to sell it in the market? So probably you can start selling your product as a raw material, or if the regulations is not that difficult, you can always get the particular permits to sell to mass market or directly to consumers, right? What other things? So, like I said, calculating your export price. Well, of course, you have to have your cost analysis inside your own operation with your fixed cost and your variable cost, and of course, tariffs, duties, especially tariffs right now, which are going to go crazy. But also, you have to do your research in that particular market. So try to find the right price for your product. For example, if you go to a market in the US and you see that the product in Walmart, for example, costs $30, that means that most likely they pay $6 or $7 for it. And that most likely that product was distributed by a distributor that also gets a cut. So he probably gets like $2. So the actual exporter is probably selling that product between $3 and $4 before it reaches the consumer. So that's something to consider. Don't think that the price that consumers are paying are the actual price that you can sell it with 20-30% margin. There's many costs that are involved in the distribution channel for each particular market. And in those cases that you need a distributor, because that is how the system works, like in the US, if you want to sell to supermarkets or Walmart or to restaurant chains, most likely you have to go to a distributor. In some other markets, there's a possibility that you can sell directly to supermarket chains and restaurants, but most likely you have to go through a distributor. So you have to vet those distributors and their services, how much they can store, how much marketing they can help you with your product. You have to build that relationship, and because both of you are going to be winning with your product, and you have to support each other. And very importantly, is in a distributor, if they are in charge of the sales, well, you're going to need them to have a very robust sales team, that they have good distribution equipment and a good network within that particular market. That's the most common way to reach potential markets, through a distributor. And of course, there are sales agents that you can partner through joint ventures. So it's very easy to get partners and very difficult to get rid of them. So be aware of that. Do very reasonable agreements. Don't give away countrywide representation at the initial stage. Go year by year, and then once you develop a partnership, you can certainly sign off a representation for the whole country to a particular person once you are aware they can handle it. Yeah, then I think we can leave it at that, the 10 minutes, and we'll leave it for some questions along the way. Thank you. Is that okay?
Eugene, are you there?
Oh yeah, I'm here. Thank you, Eduardo.
You're welcome.
Okay. Yeah, do you guys have any questions for them?
Let's have Laura say a few
Oh.
words. We asked her to give some comments, some overview. Laura gave
Okay.
a very deep and amazing presentation in session number 1. And if you haven't seen that, definitely catch the recording. It is available. And I'm not sure where it's available, but we'll be posting it. If it's not posted, then we can definitely provide it. Probably by registering for that first one, you'll get that automatically. But either way, then second one, she also gave some great perspective. And so Laura, thank you for the partnership with the Forum for International Trade Training, #1 in the world in what you do, and we really appreciate the partnership that you have with Global Chamber. What would you like to share today?
Yeah, I mean, thank you for the opportunity to be here again. I'm really enjoying these Globinars. Thank you, Marta and Eduardo. That was so good. And as a international sales and marketing professor for over a decade, I was just holding myself back from saying exactly. I really liked it because, especially most people when they think marketing, they think promotion. And the two of you pretty much talked about everything but promotion. So I love that. It's about, establishing relationships in the market, what channel you go through, and managing those relationships, because oftentimes companies work so hard to find a distributor or to find whatever channel partner, and then they don't manage it, and then they wonder why there are no sales in the market, or why nothing's happening. So I love that. I think you mentioned that, Marta. That's fantastic. It's so much is about developing these relationships, but knowing who you're looking for, knowing that it is the right market to go into. So I love what you said about trade shows. I am such a firm advocate for trade shows, the right trade show. Again, it's about planning, being strategic, and doing your homework, doing your research up front, so that you can target certain markets. And then you understand that, for instance, certain trade initiatives like trade shows or trade missions to that particular market are worth your time and your investment, because nothing's to develop business. It is, it's your time and your financial resources, of course. So I am very much a visual learner. When I hear the two of you speak, I can actually see that page in our Fit Skills training. I can see that page in the textbook. I am so visual. I'm checklist oriented, and I loved everything you said. So I just want to share. I just want to share one slide with you. I promise I'm not going to give you a deck.
No, not a deck.
Not a deck, not a deck. I can't even find, I was working on it. I was playing with it. And of course, I
There's a PowerPoint deck.
I love, no, here we go. There we go. Screen share. No, maybe not. Actually, I think I've shared the wrong one. Well, sorry. Well, I know I'm clicking through. What are you seeing now?
Get ready to export.
Okay, that's what I wanted to show you. I'm working on so many presentations, as we all can imagine. Things the last couple weeks, especially this week, have just exploded. So many opportunities for presentations. But I just want to tell you, Global Chamber, as Doug mentioned, Global Chamber has partnered with FIT to provide Fit Skills training for Global Chamber members and the Global Chamber community. Our Fit Skills training is primarily 6 fundamental courses. Everything from feasibility of international trade through to international sales and marketing. I've taken all these courses myself, and I know in my presentation the first week, I kind of thought I knew everything. I was working, and I know Eduardo was with Pro Mexico, I believe. And, you think you know what you're doing, but there are so many variables, so many complexities. Marta, you were touching on the regulatory environment and how it's different country to country. So companies, if I can stress one thing, companies really should take a strategic approach to exporting. Whether you're currently exporting now or not, or looking to expand into international markets, there needs to be that long-term thinking and that strategic approach, because you just don't know what you don't know. So if you're going to spend the time going into a market, you need to understand what you need to research, what you should establish, like the risks involved in doing business in that market. You know, how do you find out if there truly are opportunities there and if it's feasible? So FIT has a course for all of that. Our international sales marketing course takes you through everything that was mentioned by Marta and Eduardo. Highly recommend that if you want to upskill somebody on your team so that they can help your company take that systematic and strategic approach to exporting. We've got the courses here outlined on the page. Where if you see 2 logos on the bottom left, that's because our learning center is co-branded with Export Development Canada, or EDC, and we provide this training for not only, we also have trade commissioners around the globe that have taken our training, as well as trade advisors from EDC, but businesses, individuals, consultants. So we have certified professionals in over 50 countries around the globe. And as Doug mentioned, we are the global leader in specific training that deals with international trade. That's both procurement and exporting. And our training is country neutral. So it doesn't matter if you're a company located in Phoenix or in Canada or in Dubai, wherever that might be, our training is country neutral. So that's all I wanted to say, and that's it for the dreaded PowerPoint.
There are 2 kinds of deck, the painful one, which is Microsoft PowerPoint deck, and then there's the deck, the District Export Council, and both Martha and Eduardo and I am on the Arizona District Export Council, a group of volunteers that have been vetted by the Commerce Department, and we do our best to help and support the exporting community. From that and from my own work at Global Chamber, I got a little bit inspired because I think, like all of us, we recognize, and I think it was Laura who said or maybe Eduardo. Eduardo, when you were talking about it, you were saying like it's obvious that, or you were kind of saying how you were giving the impression that it was relatively easy, and quite honestly, it's not. And the reason why it's not is there's a lot of things to know. Number one, business is not easy, by the way, typically for most people. So exporting is a little bit more difficult. The other aspect, I think, Eduardo, you touched on this as well, and all of you did, is that things happen along the way. So whatever you've learned, first of all, take all the FIT training. You should do all of that. You should get lots of experience exporting and start with 1 country and 2 and keep going and going. And then after decades of work, you will one day come into work and see something you've never seen before. And you don't know how to dig yourself out of it. It's just, that's the part of the fun and challenges and opportunity that exporting brings. And so all of us, I think, probably to some extent enjoy it for that reason. Definitely not easy, definitely fun, definitely profitable if you do the homework. And so, Eugene, back to you. I just wanted to
Doug,
say hi to recognize those points. Yes, sir.
Yeah, no, if I may, I didn't meant it to be easy or simplified. What I tried to convey is that it is common sense, right?
You said
right. So it is more common sense than doing it not easy. No, it's nothing is easy.
But I think, Eduardo, if I just make a point, it's common sense maybe for you because you have a global mindset.
Right.
But I find that a lot of manufacturers that I talk to do not have a global mindset. So what's common sense to you, because you've got this broader vision, is not common sense. And frankly, I find domestic manufacturers, I don't care what country they're from, they are very scared because it's daunting doing business with a culture that is so diverse from your own, a way of thinking, a way of doing business. So I think it's about developing that global mindset and understanding other cultures and ways of doing business, and so that you can leverage those opportunities. So
I totally agree with that. I just had an experience actually this year when I went to Dubai for my Arab Health annual trip. It's the very first time that I've had to bring 2 people with me who have had 0 exposure to our international in our company even. Usually I would travel with somebody who's always been with me in every trip, so it was easy. This time around, trying to teach them and show them the differences and explain why a meeting was very heated. However, heated, it was very productive and ended great. They took it back as that was the most horrible meeting I've ever had in my life. And for me personally, I came away thinking, oh, we got through this great. Yes, there were some loud words and things because Middle Easterners are very, they can be very difficult to work with sometimes and always like to negotiate. And even more so when you're working maybe with a woman. That's something that has to be stated. It's not typical. It's not common, but it happens. And it was a lesson for them to come away with thinking, this is not standard. This is not the way we do things in the US. However, it is standard for the international world that I live in anyway. So I think you certainly have to keep that in mind that it is not going to be like your everyday sales in the US. It's going to be very different. You have to be very open-minded to different different experiences and always come away with, try to always find the positive side of what you just experienced. Because I think that's the key thing is it won't always feel good, but it may come out with a good result.
Brilliant. Absolutely. Eugene, that also brings up the point that in our final meeting next week, we haven't talked about culture and the importance of culture. So thank you, Martha, for bringing that up. I honestly, while I'm thinking here, I'm not thinking of somebody in the Phoenix area or in Arizona that has that expertise. There's many of them in Global Chamber, but I can't think of one in Arizona. So let's figure that out. If you guys think of one who's kind of a cross-cultural expert in Arizona, that would be ideal. If not, we can pull someone in from somewhere else. Well, for sure.
There's a member that does translation, right, Doug?
In Arizona?
I can't. I'll look in my files. I don't know if it's in Arizona or in another state.
Okay. Somebody like Shane Jacobs, like at Safeguard, might
Oh
be.
yeah.
He's got it's HR services, and so he might be one with his Thunderbird education. So maybe Shane, if nobody else, might be a good one. So that kind of leads us to the end. And Eugene, are the next steps for Export League are next week. It's logistics and now cross-cultural. We'll be talking about that. And ideally, we're going to have all of the speakers we've had together next week. And so we'll kind of wrap it up there. And then in 2 weeks, we actually have a Globinar for Global Chamber Phoenix, and we're going to be talking about Export League and getting kind of the final folks into the program. We're looking for as many exporters over the next couple weeks to sign up for Export League so that we can go through their applications. We'll get the applications out to everybody that's interested in getting some connections internationally. And then after 2 weeks, we'll close that application process. We'll process those, select the ones that will be getting some leads, and then we'll be announcing both the ones that get the leads and all of the group of exporters on April 24th in an in-person meeting at Thunderbird in Global Chamber's headquarters in a Welcome to Metro Phoenix event. It's a signature event where we're going to celebrate exporting. We're going to celebrate foreign direct investment within the region. And anybody new to international that's in town will be hosting them. And we've got a lineup of really amazing speakers. Before we close, Eduardo or Martha or Laura, do you have any final comments that which you would like to make, each of you?
Join the Global Chamber.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to reach out to people that you may or may not know have experience. I think that's key, is make the connection wherever you can. reach out to the organizations that we've all talked about here who can be incredibly helpful. Get on their website and get more information. There's plenty of resources on the web, and with Laura's organization with FIT, obviously, but there's plenty of stuff on the internet too that can be very helpful if you're in a quick bind, let's say. So make connections.
Get the training, get connected. There's no one answer. Don't rely necessarily on Google if you're in a real pinch. Definitely get some information there, at least to give you the information of who to check out. And then, one of the cool things about Global Chamber is, and an example of that was the other day when a member had a shipment stuck in Togo. And there's a container, it's still stuck there, and she reached out. It's like, well, now what do we do? And so there's the regular stuff that we're doing, like getting sales and marketing. Then you've got product and logistics things going on, and stuff happens all along the way. So if you're in a sales deal, like Martha talked about, where it seems like it's an argument, but it's actually a good meeting. I've had a few of those in Korea too. Where, there's a lot of verbality and a lot of aggressiveness, or what seems to be aggressiveness in their culture. I'm from New York, so we tend to be pretty aggressive as well, or perceived as aggressive. It's a cultural thing. And so if you get stuck on that, or you have some concerns, as Martha said, reach out. And that's one of the really cool things about Global Chamber. There's people like Martha, there's people like Eduardo, and now there's people like Laura. Laura, what would you like to end with?
Just that, be prepared. And if you do create an export plan or a global expansion plan, marketing plan, whatever you call it, be prepared that it's a fluid document. It's fluid, it's ever changing. I mean, look at this week. So it needs to be modified. And the marketing mix, just because we're talking about marketing and sales today, realize that it should not be cookie cutter. Just because you do business, you enter the market one way, Marta, you touched on that. Just because you enter the market one way and use a certain marketing mix in one market doesn't mean that when you're entering into another market, you do it the same way. Eduardo, you mentioned that too. Some markets are better for B2C. E-commerce, other markets, you need to go through a distributor. So remember that it's not cookie cutter, and using AI to create your business plans, your global expansion plan, realize that everybody else has access to AI too. So it needs to be unique for your business.
It's a bad tell. Now that we're getting those emails that are AI generated, it's obvious that they are. It's just not good enough. We're a little bit over, but I'm wondering would I be imposing, Laura, if you could just say a couple words, given that you're in Canada, kind of what are exporters? Those are your peeps, right? I was reading earlier today some pretty sorrowful stories about Canadian exporters and how they're feeling right now. How are you feeling? How are they feeling? Is there anything you're comfortable to share?
Yeah, I mean, do we have an hour? No, I will be brief. I've been consumed. All Canadians have been consumed. This is one of the best relationships in the world, the relationship between Canadians and Americans, and the longest unprotected border in the world. And it's just, I'm not going to get political, but yesterday, if you want to watch one great interview, there was an interview with our Foreign Affairs Minister, Melanie Joly, was on CNN. It was phenomenal. It was like the Coles Notes version of what is happening, and Canada's perspective of what we were told was the issue, which was apparently the fentanyl coming into the United States. And that was why, and not protecting the border. And that was why, President Trump was going to impose these tariffs. It has nothing to do with fentanyl, because less than 1% of the fentanyl entering into the United States has been through Canada. So it's not about fentanyl. It's about basically, crushing the Canadian economy so that the US can annex Canada. So Canadians are very docile. in general, very humble. But if you threaten their sovereignty, Canadians are not nice. And so we feel that our sovereignty's been threatened. And I'm born and raised in Canada. And, we feel very passionate. So what it has done is really evoked this patriotism amongst Canadians. And there's a whole Buy Canada movement and boycotting US products. I saw something the other day, 40% of trips that were booked to go into the United States were canceled. So, it's March break coming up next week for some schools in some provinces, and a lot of families are canceling their plans to travel to the United States, to Disney's, and going elsewhere to Mexico or Caribbean. And so it's really, we're very angry because the effect, on our economy, we're not naive. We feel that the 25% tariffs will spin us into a recession. And economists don't use our term very lightly. So we're dealing, businesses will close, but businesses will close on both sides of the border because our supply chains are so intertwined. An automotive product crosses the border 6 times apparently before you build the car. So not just the automotive industry, but other industries. So there will be job losses, shutdowns on both sides of the border. But Canada has, just in a nutshell, taken a very strong policy because we all know that uncertainty is terrible for investment. And so we've said the policy of the Canadian government is to say, we don't want to pause. We don't want a reprieve for 30 days. Either you lift the tariffs or you don't. So if you just give us a pause, we're still going ahead with retaliatory measures because the US has not upheld the CUSMA or USMCA. So that's the status. So, that's unless the, tariffs is off the table, Canada will continue with its measures and fighting back because we are protecting our livelihoods and our economy. So that in a nutshell. So that CNN interview is very good with Melanie Jolie. But that's what we're feeling, and we're angry. I mean, it's not like Canadians to boo the national anthem in the NHL of American teams. It's just not like us, but it really has our back up, and
And I like how Canadians are switching from bourbon to tequila.
Yeah,
Okay,
well,
that works. That works.
Mexico could become the winner here. Mexico's going to get a lot of tourists from Canada for sure. But and what Canadians are doing is switching to, so instead of the California wines, they're switching to, we have wine industry in both Niagara and in BC, some great wines. So we're buying more local, that's for sure. But the bourbon thing, yeah.
And the key challenge, if I may, is that they're going to diversify those supply chains, and that is going to have a significant impact for U.S. companies into the future.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, by the way, California voted for the other person. So
I know. That's the thing. Then that's been talked about too.
we did our best.
That has been talked about. But Elizabeth, you make a good point that a lot of Canadians are not happy, but it's like this is a pivotal moment to really, we've been talking about diversification. Canada signed 15 free trade agreements that encompass 51 countries around the globe. And really, we have not taken advantage. We have not leveraged them except for CUSMA, right? NAFTA, 2.0. So now, the Canadian Trade Commissioner Service is saying, use one of those 14 other free trade agreements, CETA. We have a comprehensive economic trade agreement with Europe. So it's like, now's that pivotal moment. We're facing an existential crisis. Now is the time to really start to diversify both our supply chain, both ends, vendors and customers.
Yeah.
So.
Unintended consequences. I think that the group of people who are making these decisions have no idea what they're creating. It's very transactional, and as we know, international business there's transactions, but transactional strategic, you've got to be planning off in the future. You've got relationships to build, and these kinds of things kill relationships that for generations impact relationships. It's not a good situation. Elizabeth, you know how this all works, right? I see you there.
It's elbows up in Canada, from what I understand.
It is.
Elbows up. What does that mean? I'm sorry.
It's
Is that a cultural thing?
do you know, Laura?
I heard that reference the other day, and I've watched so much media, I can't remember where I heard it from.
From what I understand, it comes from hockey. Gordie Howe, a well-known hockey player, and I know it from years ago. But apparently, as you said, Canadians are very mellow. But when it's time to fight, I guess in hockey, it's elbows up.
So Paul,
I've seen the reference multiple times. So if you see the elbows up, that's what it means.
Paul Sims in the audience, and he's living in the U.S., but he's a Canadian. You sound like you know what that is, Paul.
When you go into the corners and when you're playing hockey, you put your elbows up to protect yourself from whoever might be coming in to hit you afterwards. So elbows up is a way of protecting yourself in
head up.
hockey. And
head up.
Laura, I was going to ask you a question. Can you also comment on the work that's being done to remove internal trade barriers in Canada, which has really been spurred by this as well?
Yeah, it's really interesting because the provinces, they've been apparently wanting to remove interprovincial trade barriers for years, but it's never happened. Every province tries to protect its own industries. And so now, I think the IMF probably 5-6 years ago released a study, and there's been many studies done that the contribution of these interprovincial trade barriers on Canada's GDP is like basically costing us 5% of our GDP, 5-6%. So they're really, now's the time. So if we can't export, or if we're being, if a 25% tariff is being imposed on Canadian products going into the US, why wouldn't we trade more with each other? So like one example is the wine. So British Columbia wines can't be sold in Ontario and the other provinces. So that's one example. But from my understanding, and I'm definitely not an expert, a lot of it is regulatory. So it's like the regulation and the licensing. So for those professionals, they're not certified to work in other provinces. So it's a licensing thing, and it's about, the movement of professionals and individuals. But that's a large part of the interprovincial barriers. But if now it seems like provinces, the country, we're taking a Team Canada approach. So there's more receptive, there's an interest in removing these barriers so that we can boost our economy and mitigate some of the risks.
For Canadian exporters, then there's a view that of expanding the playing field, if you will. What would your recommendation be to American exporters? Should they forget about Canada for a while?
I'm so glad you asked this question, because yesterday I was actually on a webinar, and I just attended. So I was in the background, and it was Canadian manufacturers and exporters. So it's a CME is the acronym. And then there was another manufacturing consortium. And then it was the chief economist from the Bank of Montreal, BMO. And then I think it was organized by a manufacturing publication. So it was very policy oriented, what needs to happen. But the messaging for me that I heard loud and clear was, although the webinar was touted about talking about, diversification, diversifying supply chains, a lot of it was, we need to get the government, you need to lobby all levels of government to, remove these tariffs because this is our problem. And so it was, and interprovincial barriers were talked about quite a bit. But I was sitting there thinking, wow, like you're looking at this, and this webinar was supposed to be about what manufacturers can do. All they want to do is solve this crisis. They want to continue doing business with the United States. So it's kind of, it's cautionary, because if the tariffs get removed, then companies, and so whether you're a Canadian manufacturer, a US manufacturer, you can't stop looking to other markets. So if this trade war goes away and your number one customer is in Canada, great, you'll continue with that number one customer, but you should have other markets in the hopper. You should be diversifying because, you know, what if other economic uncertainties, what if another administration, or what, you know, these geopolitical uncertainties come about? It's not just one and done. There's constant risk. So my word of advice is to continue to diversify and to look for opportunities outside of one major partner. It's great that you go back to doing business with Canada. I mean, and we want to do business with the United States, but you need to be looking at other opportunities.
That word diversification was the number one word that we've had in our two last Globinars, yesterday and today, where we had people from around the world within Global Chamber talking about what should you be thinking about, what you should be doing now. That's number one, because of the uncertainty, and to reduce risk. It's not to close down, it's to expand, you know, and to go to new markets so that you've got that portfolio effect working for you in a positive way. Martha, did you have any final comments that you'd like to make?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head, and that's a great place to end. It's fantastic if you can get into one market if you're a brand new exporter, but certainly be looking towards more, because you never know what can happen. I mean, we had our biggest customer several years ago was Iran, believe it or not. And then Iran put some measures in place where you could not export finished product anymore. So then that changed to sending mixes, and then mixes turned into nothing, and we lost that business, and there was nothing we could do about it. That was just a regulatory thing. And then we had a customer in Sudan, and then the war broke out, and we lost that customer. So you never know what can happen, but things can always come back. We had established Ukraine as a country of export, and that was through the U.S. Commercial Service. And then when the war broke out, of course, everything paused, but now they're back, and we're building sales back up again with them. And so you just never know. This world is ever changing. And I think diversification is absolutely the key to continuing to grow.
Brilliant. Eugene, do you want to make any final comments? We went a little bit over, but I thought that was well worth it. Great information from all of you.
Let me just wrap up this event. So thank you for your time, everyone, and especially thanks to Martha, Laura, and Eduardo, and of course, Doug. You guys had amazing presentation today, and I hope this event was helpful for everyone. As Doug mentioned before, we have the last training session next Friday on same time, which is about logistics and exporting. So if you guys are interested in, please join us. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Happy International Women's Day tomorrow.
Hey, there you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
guys.
you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye.
Happy